This whole film has been probably the most difficult movie I've ever made. It's so fun, and it's so interesting, and it's so exciting and tense. Blow me. I have a new level of fear now. It's not, you know, like I can't be scared as easily.
Resident Evil. That's a very, very strong concept for the screen.
You know, it's a rich world. The themes are good, you know, gene splicing, genetic testing, viral research, underground labs, an evil corporation that is a multinational, has labs and bases all around the world.
The silence involved and the mansions and the quietness and the stillness of your surrounding. You had to solve things. Every turn you take, something new comes out. And I love the feeling of stillness about it, how it's just empty. And then you'll turn a corridor and suddenly be attacked by all these zombies.
I played Resident Evil and I was playing Resident Evil 2, and it just got to a point where I just loved the game so much. I thought, this is just fantastic. You know, someone has to make this into a movie.
After you?
We were thinking about a horror action thriller for quite a long time. And suddenly we realized that that could be the one we really want to do.
It has a real brooding, suspenseful atmosphere that translates very well into a movie. And I feel if I stay true to the game, true enough to please the creators of the game, then I'm going to make a movie that the fans will be happy with as well.
最初から映画チックな、ゲームと言われてたし、できる限り早い時期に映画化してほしいとは思ってました。
What I like in Resident Evil is the mixture between the horror and the action.
The other thing about it is that it has at its center a true evil, and evil is always very dramatic.
Don't play it at home alone at night. Alice pretty much is born for the first time when this movie starts. She loses her memory and wakes up, doesn't know who she is or where she is, and literally gets swept up in all this chaos and doesn't understand what's going on.
What you see at the start is like her birth, you know, because she's completely fresh to the world. Although she's fully grown, she's naked and she has no idea who she is. And her environment is totally alien and scary.
And slowly throughout the movie, she's pretty much on a quest to understand who she is and who she was and whether that person is someone she wants to be. Rain's what I like about her is she's just, you know, a go-getter. Kind of like, I don't care. I don't really care about anything but what I have to do.
Do that again, please. Here we go, shooting. Okay. Set.
He doesn't really come into full focus until he knows that there's something's gone on with the Alice character, but he can't actually define what that is. The hive's security situation has been breached, and a gas is injected into the hive in order to knock anybody who's awake out, and therefore they wake up, but having lost some part of their memory. You know, he doesn't actually know who the hell he is.
My character's name is Kaplan. He's a member of a crack commando team who are sent into this underground hive to shut down the Red Queen, this supercomputer that operates the hive that has gone haywire. He has to make the choice to be courageous or whatever, or just find it within himself to carry on with the mission. A computer of this size has not been shut down by many people, if ever. He actually manages to achieve the mission and shuts the computer down, but in so doing, then unleashes a whole lot of terror.
I'm one of the unknown elements in this script. Well-trained, hardened soldiers are uncomfortable with my presence because I don't match up with who I say I am.
Well, I play one, who's the commando leader. We've come out to the hive on the fact that the Red Queen has gone homicidal. We have disabled her temporarily. If you were killed or incapacitated, then the computer could apply its own defense. But we're not aware of what the T-virus does.
The original intention of the T-virus was to combat insufficient cellular growth.
When a human being dies, energy is left within the body, electric energy. Hence our hair still grows, our nails still grow. What the research was trying to do was to take this energy and use it to extend life. One of the consequences of it, though, is that it brings the dead back to life.
As we speak, I'm sure that around the world there are tests made with animals, you know, and genetic tests, and we all know that they can go terribly wrong, and that's really what the movie is all about. That there's tests which go terribly, terribly wrong.
Before we started shooting, we sent them for very intensive training sessions, which was led by an ex-Navy SEAL, and he basically kicked their asses.
We started out with the actors doing commando training, which is a military form of training, how to take over a building. We also taught them climbing, because throughout the movie they have to climb excess tunnels. We did also martial arts with the actors, variation from Taekwondo and American Karate. I call it Hell Week. We gave them a Hell Week.
James tried to avoid teaching us the real moves, even the stunt moves that he was teaching us on, like how to crack bone.
What's important is you get this.
Okay.
And then clap.
We'll be shooting guns.
Now turn your head.
They shoot at you.
Actors like Mila, she had extensive martial arts, because if you see in the film, she's doing a lot of kicking butt on the undead.
That message will hold. Go, 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 go!
Her kicks are very high, very effective. You can ask the director. And
Oh, I loved it. I got to do one of my favorite things, which is shoot a gun.
Fantastic!
the diving was difficult. And the reason is because Anna Ball, the actress that we had to do this with, she never scuba dived before. Not only am I teaching her how to use scuba equipment, but in the film, she has to go under the water 3 meters, take the equipment off. She's weighted down with weights on a board so we can roll her to the screen. We have really a lot of great stunts in this film. We have explosions in this film. We have a lot of shooting people up, so there's a lot of squibbing. We have a lot of ratchet systems, falls, climbing, a lot of fighting, you name it. A lot of the actors doing a lot of their own things. We do have doubles for them, but a lot of the things the actors do themselves, I must honestly say. We had one stunt guy, he burned 20 times for a shot. In America, the stunt guys burn 4 times, and they'll say, okay, look, talk to our agent, you know. But the German stunt guy, he burned 20 times for a stunt. Eric, who's the main actor, he plays Matt in the film, burnt in this film. He didn't pretend like he was burning. We burned his leg in the film. We lit him up, burned his leg, and you know, that's extensive for an actor to do. As well as the director of photography, we burned him too in this film. The producer, Jeremy Bolt, he came off the producer thing, came down, became a zombie, no joke.
Oh, I'm gonna look really scary.
He was squibbed, so he was shot. He had to fall down.
Very much.
And then he did a ratchet system, so he also did a stunt in this film. So
When we came to Berlin, there was this empty U-Bahn station underneath the Reichstag. As soon as we walked in and saw the space, it was just, I think, the best location anybody had ever seen. We're walking around it, we thought, oh, this is great. And we were running around, you know, really excited at all the space, thinking, well, we could do actually a lot of the movie in here.
In between the walls, I mean, you know that you can sneak through there. It's just like being in a mansion as a child of this like old military man where you know that there's secrets in this place. It's that kind of place where you feel like you're being watched. I mean, my God, just a piece of history brought to life, like the architecture in the film.
We wanted to create something new. You know, people want to see something new. We avoided anything that's too cartoony and tried to use just always contemporary technology. We've tried to avoid anything that's too obviously science fiction. We went back to what is available technology, and we've used that. There's a corridor that they go down that lasers come out and move all the way down the corridor. How do you do that without giving away the fact that there might be something in there? And, you know, do you have sort of big lines where the lasers pop through, or do you have holes where the lasers pop out? Nothing really kind of worked. And Paul suddenly said, you know, the lasers should come through the walls. And I said, well, then they should be glass, shouldn't they?
One of our characters is caught in a trap. He's in a locked corridor that has a defense mechanism. At the other end of the corridor is the computer that controls the whole facility. That computer doesn't want anybody getting close to it. It knows it's in danger. One of the defense mechanisms is a laser system. This laser system comes through and just exercises any living beings that are coming in.
The Queen's Chamber is the very heart of the hive. So the way I chose to try and get some sense of menace in this was really just the space of the room, to make it very kind of monumental and make it seem a bit like Stonehenge.
When you go into it, it kind of has a slightly religious feel. You feel like you're in a tomb or you're in a temple.
And suddenly you're going to a place you've never been to before. I wanted them to look like architecture, like kind of broken high-rise buildings of some sort. So that's really where the inspiration came from. With the whole colour of that, it also had to be dark and sinister.
Being in the specimen tanks and shooting the machine guns and hearing it echo through the corridors and walking around during break silently through these echoey, dark, and the smoke, and it's very, very eerie, very scary.
Then when you get into the utility tunnels, I mean, just the steam and the moisture and the look.
It is very close to some of the shots in the game. Plus, and that's the good thing, is that it plays very low-tech, and I like that.
Then rain ends up on this side of the corridor. Because it's terrifying, it's claustrophobic, horrible. But to actually work up there, it's difficult. You know, not only do you have to get the actors up there, you have to get a camera crew up there, and then you have to light these tiny little spaces.
You know, being in these contained environments with so many people snarling and the noise and everything, it's overwhelming. I mean, it looks so much like the video game. And a lot of things in this film have been recreated from different famous scenes in the video game.
That match isn't gonna hold. Keep moving.
A couple of the sets, like the access tunnels, we had a very small camera track hidden up in the ceiling that was disguised to look like a lot of pipes that were already up there. And you could just run the camera on this fantastic little dolly up there along the top of the pipes.
Every time we come to a new set, there was a time when it seemed to get worse and worse and worse, and we were down in the sewers and then just above the pipes with all the zombies below, and every day we go, is this ever going to get better? Are we ever going to see sunlight?
The cam Wildcat's a special rig that we flew in from Vienna. It's never been used on a feature film before in North America. It's basically a camera system that runs on wires, and the wires are rigged to one end, they're rigged to the ground, and the other end are rigged to a construction crane. So our construction crane is 350 feet high. So the camera goes from basically eye level, close-up of Mila, to 350 feet in the air, and it does that in about 20 seconds, which is like 70 miles an hour. What you didn't want to do is take the zombies from the kind of late 70s, early 80s movies and just do those again.
The veins popping out and the eyes, I think it's the eyes most of all. The contacts are sick.
When we filmed the zombie sequences in the utility pipes, I mean, it was really, our hearts were racing. When they started moving, you forget that it's not real.
To scare the shit out of people.
We went into medical science. We avoided everything else like the plague. Went into every mortuary book we could find, every disease-ridden tomb that we could read. Still keeps them feeling real, pale down a little bit as would a real dead body. This has never, so far to my knowledge, ever been done. Dogs have had little outfits put on them, dogs have had wounds put on them, but no one has ever tried to give the feeling of a skinned dog before.
No, not too
close. It's tough enough to work with animals. But then to work with animals that are supposed to be decomposing, you know, to put makeup on an animal is incredibly difficult.
It's not like working with actors, because actors don't lick the makeup off their faces, and actors don't shave.
This creature has never been made before. There's been lots of animatronic creatures in films, but this one has no eyes. This one is predatory, it moves like a big cat. The movements of it are based around real creatures.
Its brain popping out, and it's got the crazy fangs of a dog, you know, just protruding out of its spotted gums. I mean, the detail on this creature is just amazing.
The creature is a licker. It's a form of licker. It's been developed by the Umbrella Corporation by injecting the T virus into living tissue. But it's unstable. And when the licker begins to feed upon the DNA of another living being, it begins to mutate.
I mean, you know, the liquor in number 2, like going back with his tongue out, dropping from the ceiling on that guy, it's in the movie.
We wanted to make it a lot more powerful, a lot more threatening. We actually built 2 main creatures. One was more gross movement for battering ram. He was quite heavy steel inside him, reinforced, and we could throw him at windows and doors.
Sorry.
There's a bloke inside. He's the rear portion, which gives him a lot of mobility. The second one was a much more controlled one. Radio-controlled face, the jaw splits, the 2 teeth at the front come out, move around independently and together. The head is a much more controlled movement. The puppeteer at the back of the creature, every movement that he does is directly corresponds to the front end of the creature. So as he's performing, then the creature's performing. With the best will in the world, you can't really animate animatronically a 4 to 6 foot length tongue.
Fabulous.
It's too big. Shouldn't it be skinnier and like razor sharp points, but like skinny and like a little whip?
This is an early design for the tongue.
What Penny's doing here is doing different muscle setups in the neck, so each muscle has a different control. So every time he moves his head, everything reacts correctly with it. So when he attacks his prey or whips his head, the character setup is a bit more complicated because it actually doesn't have a skin. It's just all muscle and sinew.
I just realized where you placed this chair. I think I'm over the trap door where the creature falls through. I'm afraid to look down. Stay away from the button.
It hunts flesh, like the zombies hunt flesh, but the zombies have no intelligence left.
I really wish that I would die, like, being gutted out alive by that creature because he's just so sick and morbid.
I was like, God, if only I could have one of those on a leash.
This is going to be an exceptionally scary film.
It's exactly the kind of movie that I would go and see.
Find the points when the audience is going to be hurling that popcorn in the air.
It's going to cause a lot of bad dreams for a whole new generation of kids.
And to see me in a wet mini dress and a gun. I mean, come on. What more can you ask for from Resident Evil?
I'm a huge fan of early John Carpenter films, Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, The Fog, and the kind of scores that those movies had. They were very aggressive, intense, electro-based scores. You know, they weren't traditional orchestral scores in any way. And what we wanted was something like that. Kind of like early Carpenter, but for the 21st century. We definitely needed something very different to the usual just straight composer route. And that's why, you know, we came up with the idea of pairing Marco and Manson, because, you know, I felt they'd be very, very complementary if we could actually pull it off. And when we talked about it, everyone said, you're insane, it'll never work, you know, you'll never be able to get them. But, you know, I was a huge fan of Marco's because of the Scream movies and Mimic as well, which is a fantastic score.
So I'm scared to death of horror movies. I think the first horror movie I've seen was Scream. But the thing it does lend itself to, scary movies and horror movies, it does lend itself really well to exploring different timbres, orchestral timbres, and 20th century music techniques, which, you know, I'm a big fan of. I think that's why this is sort of a genre thing that has worked out.
Well, whenever I write music for my own albums, I've always got some sort of image or scene, or I'm often kind of making a concept of a record to begin with. So it was always a dream of mine to be able to compose music to an image, because I don't feel you can have one without the other. So I wanted to take what I do in rock music and translate that into scoring without writing rock songs. And I wanted to try and make this very much unlike my music that I normally do with my band, but still make it exciting.
Prep for entry to the Hive.
So there is a lot of heavy guitar elements to it, but there's also a lot of very melodic and very specific sound textures that try and enhance the scene. There were three elements that I noticed right off the bat from the film that I wanted to incorporate into everything I did. One was a bit of childishness related to Alice in Wonderland because of the Red Queen. One was a very extreme coldness and the biological feel. And the other one was a bit of a fascist military element with the commandos. I did create a theme for the Red Queen. So when they first introduce her, there's a very childish waltzing melody.
Get out, you can't be in here.
Don't listen to anything she says. She's a holographic representation of the Red Queen.
You have to get out.
Modeled after the head programmer's daughter.
And then when she comes back later and starts telling them that they're basically fucked and here's why, it returns in a different, more menacing shape.
The T-virus provides a massive jolt both to cellular growth and to those trace electrical impulses. But quite simply, it reanimates the body.
And I'm a huge fan of children's music, and my inspiration for the main theme melody was based very much on just imagining sort of Alice in Wonderland inserted into this just terrible world of decay and biological warfare.
It's a very modern feeling film. It's cut in a very extreme way and it's lit in a very extreme way. And for me, I mean, the best way I can describe it is very modern. It's very glacial. And it needed a kind of modern sound to go with it.
I think the action scenes are probably the ones that are the most exciting. That very electronic, very rigid metal guitars that couldn't possibly be played by a rock and roll band. It's completely electronic, completely cold and emotionless and just violent.
Because it's electronic, it gives the kind of grind and the relentlessness of what the zombies are. You know, they just keep coming and coming and coming. And this music just keeps going and going and going, and it doesn't change.
From the first time I went over to his studio and saw what he was doing, the sounds that he was creating, I knew that he was approaching it from a scoring point of view rather than from a song point of view.
I noticed when I would, go to his studio that he, writes out the sheet music traditionally. Mine are sort of like drawings and more descriptions and shapes. And, the notes are written down, D, E, F, and R. I'll sometimes make up my own notes, but I don't use the traditional way of doing that because I was never schooled to do that.
Traditionally, I approach a film more from a melodic standpoint first and think of thematic material that'll go with it. When I went to Manson's, he was working on thematic material too, but stuff was texturally based and sonically based.
When we first started working with Manson, it was almost like working with a sound designer rather than a composer, because the first thing he played me was like 10 noises, almost like a really fucked up ticking clock. And, just strange sounds. And I go, I like that, I like that, I don't like that. And then he would go off and work those textural details into an actual track.
I didn't understand that the composer or person responsible for the music wasn't, I guess, not allowed or not supposed to also create other sounds or ambiences or things like that, because I felt like, just from my background and how I make music, that's a very important part of the piece. Lynch is a good example of his films and the drones and things like that he uses quite often in, for Elephant Man or, Blue Velvet and things like that. Very, very essential to a movie and very essential to the way I work.
For instance, if Mila's walking down an empty hallway, you want to play the ambience of that it is what it is and that it's scary, and it could either be a sound effect type of thing or it could be a musical thing that borders on a sonic representation of that.
I feel like I've been able to, over the years, accomplish and have a knack for figuring out what notes and what melodies create what sort of moods. And I'm a big fan of also what frequencies do to people, much like when a dog hears a high frequency that we don't hear.
Our editor, Alex, has this really cute miniature poodle, and this poodle just sits at his feet, like totally devoted, for working really long hours, like 16 hours a day, just sits there. Calm, quiet, loving poodle. Sometimes it sits at his feet and just stares up at him like that. And then one day, this dog went berserk. He's like running around, barking, trying to get out the window. And we're like looking at it, what's got into the dog? I mean, what's it eaten? And we realized we were laying Manson's music up. And there's clearly something in the music was driving the dog completely insane. I figured it was one of the high frequency noises that he kept threatening to put in the movie to fuck everyone up.
There are similar things that can be done to human beings as well. And sometimes people won't know why they feel the way they do when they hear my stuff. And if it gives them, you know, some sort of intestinal problems that could be my fault as well.
It's turned out much better than I ever thought it was going to be. And I think what's really original about it is that it feels like source music. It feels like music we've taken off people's albums, but it fits perfectly with the picture. So it kind of works like score, but it feels like source. So we started calling it scorce music.
I enjoyed scoring so much that it probably frightens my band, because it's something that came much more naturally to me, even though I'm not a classically trained musician. I approach it in a childish way and just do things by what feels and sounds right. And if it scares me or makes me feel a certain way, then I know that it's working right.
We wanted to create something new. You know, if people want to see something new, if they've played the game, they want to go to a different place now. It's almost like doing a kind of live-action version of a new version of the game. Avoided anything that's too cartoony and tried to use just always contemporary technology. We've tried to avoid anything that's too obviously science fiction. We went back to what is available technology, and we've used that. We also visited a lot of contemporary bunkers. We went to some nuclear bunkers in England, nuclear bunkers in Germany, and you know, some from the 60s, some from the 70s, and some that were only built about 10 or 12 years ago. There's a couple of contemporary Japanese architects who just do the most wonderful buildings above ground in concrete, and it's, you know, it was a perfect look to use for below ground. It looks very strong, and you know, so we use that as inspiration, just that kind of pre-stressed concrete look. The shape of the control room is a triangle, and partly that was inspired because there are big scenes in there that there's a lot of talk goes on in them, and so you needed to have some interesting angles, and the shape of that room, you know, really gave you that. And we set the desk down slightly so that you'd have an eye line straight through from the corridor and you'd be able to see all the people. One of the big things that we really wanted to achieve with the design of this film was the whole idea of labyrinths. When you play the game, you walk down corridors, they go around corners, you never know what's going to be around that corridor. The spaces and the angles are designed to be very disorienting, and that's one of the big things we wanted to take from the game. With the sets, I've very consciously tried to design everything to be either like a labyrinth, or to be at least very kind of visually disorienting, so that you can't get quite a grasp on where you are.
We started off with the first visuals of the creature from the game, and then increased it in size, made it more predatory, made it much more aggressive. This creature has never been made before.
Its brain popping out, and it's got the crazy fangs of a dog, you know, just protruding out of its spotted gums. I mean, the detail on this creature is just amazing.
We wanted to make it a lot more powerful, a lot more threatening. We actually built two main creatures. One was more gross movement for battering ram. He was quite heavy steel inside him, reinforced, and we could throw him at windows and doors. The second one was a much more controlled one, radio-controlled face, the jaw splits, the two teeth at the front come out, move around independently and together. The head is a much more controlled movement. The puppeteer at the back of the creature, every movement that he does is directly corresponds to the front end of the creature.
The movements of it are based around real animals. The jaw drops and splits like an anaconda, and to accommodate the tongue. It's a lot of it is all based on real stuff. You know, the way the skin's been sculpted is based on anatomical real skin. It's because it's a mixture of real creatures that's been put together genetically.
Your ass on a plate.
Whenever you like.
Right, stand by.
Fantastic! That totally looks real. That's great. That looks like it's really, really there. I think that's why I suddenly feel like, you know, when you get to the Boyle shot, it's a different tongue because it looks completely different. You know, because I think so, yeah. Otherwise, it just looks like two completely different tongues. So that she's aiming at that. Yet when she hits, it looks like that. So I was glimpsing it. I just thought if you just tipped up slightly, we'd be able to see the brain, but then come low enough so that we get the teeth action as he rears back.
Can limit exactly the position how far they can come out. Stewart by himself. That's cool.
Your arm is much bigger and
that's the problem for him.
So it's too far away from him.
Beautiful and gooey and yucky and...
It's scary, it's disturbing, and then you can go home and have a nice cup of cocoa.
What happens is the laser turns into a grid and passes through his body, just dicing him, effectively. So we started with the actor in a position that we liked for the dicing. Then what we did was we built a full-scale model of him.
This is where his face will fall apart in the foreground. You can see the background's a little out of focus, but the idea is that now this will go out of focus and the focus will go back to the background action. The idea with the head is that we have a foreground shot. So if you were the camera looking at me and I was in the foreground, in the background, over my right shoulder, over the actor's right shoulder, you'll see my face like this and you'll see a piece of it fall off.
1, 2, 3.
And then we had that full-scale model cubed and fall apart. And you see that happen. But rather than see it happen in miniature or see it happen digital, you see it effectively happen for real.
You can see all the green poles going in. Inside those sleeves are other sleeves. They're connected in the back end so that we can pull out different parts. The men can pull out different parts of the body so they can fall and we can film it all. But this will be in the background, his back part as a reflection. So even though we're looking at his face, in the background we'll see this reflection on the wall, so we have to shoot his backside.
I mean, they're going to cut me up. They're going to slice me. Pulled me onto the floor in a bag. A little bag, I was surprised. Shit!
shot.
Yes.
And he does this bit.
Yeah.
At the end of the shot, just say lower your hand, and then we'll have
Clean place of
background
him
painting
without his hand.
Without having to.
Okay, well, we'll just do the action for you while he keeps his arm down. Yeah, all right.
Excellent. When we're done, we're going to peel off pieces from here. You'll do the move again just to get empty sets. First, we'll peel off the medic, then we'll move a bag, then we'll
But
move...
can we just see the end position first?
Yeah, see the end position.
Stay conscious. We're going into shot.
Stay awake!
Well, I get my head cut off, which was really upsetting. Obviously, I had to have a cast made of my head, but when I saw it, it was really upsetting to see yourself dead, but you know, perfectly replicated.
Head needs to be bent forward a little bit.
This is the first time we see the laser cut a slice of her throat. It's the first shot. We'll be adding blood to this area.
All right.
Everybody doesn't need to be that step out. Okay. That camera we're doing place now.
Right. Yes.
And we go back to 24 frames on this. Yeah.
So we're going to take this head off the body, pull it off the blue screen, and there he goes.
Come on!
$12, 41, 44.
This is 42.
This train tracks is a service train for this secret organization that's underground, and the duty of the train is to move cargo from the dock into the laboratories. A real train was used for the sets and for the people to get in.
The train was quite a big number for us. It was actually pretty much the biggest thing we had to do on the film, not in terms of size, but just in terms of the amount of engineering that went into it and what it had to do. The tracks underneath here were too deep for the train, so we had to build the whole thing up about 2 or 3 feet and build about 200 or 300 meters of rostrum that were strong enough to hold a 12-ton train. There's a whole miniature unit that's back in London that has taken the designs from the train and has built our train exactly in miniature.
Again, the train is built to match the train in the movie on the set. Pieces have been taken off during the photography and pieces are taken off during the wreck, but it's an 8th scale train. The track started down there and came the whole 150 feet here, which in scale would have been 1,200 feet of a real train. It was driven by wires, by a drill. We had 2 drills. One was marked train and one was marked camera. And when the train takes off in the set, we cut to a shot here where it continues and goes into the tunnel. So it goes from real to fake.
This has never, so far to my knowledge, ever been done. Dogs have had little outfits put on them, dogs have had wounds put on them, but no one has ever tried to give the feeling of a skinned dog before.
No, not too.
It's tough enough to work with animals.
But then to work with animals that are supposed to be decomposing, you know, to put makeup on an animal is incredibly difficult.
It's not like working with actors, because actors don't lick the makeup off their faces, and actors don't shake. And when you have a lot of congealed blood on top of your dog, it's going to be very interesting for the poor old props masters, I'm afraid, on set.
Good boy.
Organise doing this one, step back.
Oh, but I feel bad for the zombie dogs. No. You won't feel bad for the zombie dogs. They are so evil and just so lifeless.
Good. Stay back. Stay. Tell me when you want him to charge.
You know, I like the zombie dog. You know, the sugar window. And the window now has it's like 1 inch. And then you say, oh, but doesn't look right, the window, we should put 2 inch. And the trainer say, you cannot put 2 inch because I used to train my dog with a 1 inch window. If he cannot break through, then he will never listen to me again.
What is everybody doing?
Yeah, what the how are they covering me in?
Good boy. Now I want some blood on there.
Yeah.
Good test, stay.
You like doing the blood bit, Joe, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
In a very early draft of the script, I pretty much had the ending of the film as it was released. But when it got closer to the shoot, there were two things that kind of weighed against that ending. One was a budget issue. It was deemed too expensive to shoot, to have this big devastated city. And the other was, it was felt that it would be too depressing to kind of see the city overrun with the undead. So I wrote and we shot a completely different ending, which is a more up ending, which is 6 months after the incident at the Hive. You know, Mila's now wearing a different costume and she's become this kind of kick-ass Avenger who's hunting down the Umbrella Corporation, looking for Matt, who's been taken off mutating. And she's gone looking for him and she walks into Umbrella headquarters.
It's been 6 months since the Hive. I got out, but Matt didn't. I know that they're still holding him, experimenting, studying him. I've never given up, I've never stopped looking.
Can I help you?
I hope so.
And the idea was we'd have this rocket shoot at camera and then kind of freeze, and then the front of the rocket would just split apart. And you'd see lots of mini rockets inside, like smart rockets, that would each go for an individual target. And then suddenly we go back into real time and the rockets would go and like nail each of these guys. So it was quite a cool ending, but it was smaller. And it was definitely more up because, you know, it was a very action-y ending and she was kicking ass. But you know what, we looked at it and it just never felt right. You know, it just tied everything up too neatly. It felt like action was starting and what you really wanted to see was like a big fight or something, but then suddenly the movie was stopping. And I think, you know, when you write scripts, you know, you write an ending for a reason, you know, it feels right. And, you know, this happens quite often, is you go and you change it, and then eventually, it doesn't matter what you change it to, it never feels right, and you go back to what you originally had, and that's what we did. And it was a bit of a risk because it's a pretty depressing ending. You know, everyone's dead. And it's one girl alone in a city of the undead. And I love it because for me, it's very reminiscent of movies I love from the 70s. You know, people used to end movies like that all the time in the 70s. It used to be great. They used to have these really bleak, grim endings. Like the original Charlton Heston version of Planet of the Apes. Just fantastic ending. Really depressing. The end of Omega Man, for example. But, you know, people were into bleak endings in the 70s. And I think this is a movie that's very influenced by 70s films. And I think it's right that we went for the kind of bleak ending. And I think it really, for me, it really works.
Go, let go!
What you didn't want to do is take the zombies from the kind of late 70s, early 80s movies and just do those again. But at the same time, you know, the zombies are zombies, and people know what zombies do. You know, they shuffle around, they're very slow, they look a particular way.
Of course, the movement of zombies have the horror. On the one side, slow, but then dangerous and also weird. So we took dancers and trained them for many weeks.
Our approach was very much to do the best possible makeup and prosthetic job we could. Train the zombies to move as good as they could. And then keep them, you know, keep them off screen for as long as possible.
He wanted as much realism as he could possibly get. So we went into medical science. We avoided everything else like the plague. Went into every mortuary book we could find, every disease-ridden tomb that we could read, and we took it from an inside-out T-virus that erupts at the corners of their mouths, the nose and the eyes, still keeps them feeling real, pale down a little bit as would a real dead body.
That bit behind would move against it. That's how it was.
The fact with these zombies is they're slow because there's a logical explanation why they're slow, because they're conserving energy. So for the last moment they go, ah! You know, and they're fast.
We made that very clear to all the people who were working on the movie that they have to think in terms of character, and according to the character and according to what happened to them, they create a zombie and then they create another zombie.
If you die from suffocation, then you have a certain tinge of blue. If you die from drowning, you go a rather charming ochre colour.
Sounded like her.
See, now this is why I did the film. So that I could become a zombie.
being the production designer and the costume designer really came into its own, because I knew what I was designing with the sets, and I could then create a whole image, a complete image. Everything had this wonderful kind of monochromatic shine to it. When you first see them, they all look the same. All these black commandos, they've got these gas masks on that we mirrored the actual glass in here, so you couldn't see their eyes, which is always quite scary. But then, as you get to see each one of them individually, each one has got a slightly individualized costume. The back on each one is different. They were armed to the teeth as well, with guns. We took ordinary guns because we wanted them to be real. This communication thing was in here, which was an adapted mobile phone. When they wanted to go through doorways, they had these jack plugs here that they could pull out from their costume, and they jack into a doorway and make it open.
There was one dress that was so good because it was a mini skirt and the dress together, and we wanted to show my legs, we wanted to show my body because she fights, and it's nice to be able to see somebody's body when they're doing stunts and doing fights and seeing the shape of things.
By the end, she's this real kick-ass, sexy, kicking all jumping commando. It's fantastic.
By wearing that dress, I gave her a lot of problems because, she had bare arms, so you can't wear pants. For example, in the closing sequence where she's fighting the creature, she's like getting crashed all over the place. She's rolling around, she's on bare metal gratings, getting dragged across them. At the end of the movie, her character, Alice, is covered in bruises and cuts, and I got to tell you, those cuts and bruises, they're not makeup, they're there for real. That's how she ended up at the end of the film.
What I like about her is she's just, a go-getter. Kind of like, I don't care. And she gets to shoot a machine gun and... I mean, it's like being a kid and playing Commando. Only thing, you never had the realistic toys, like, machine guns with dummy bullets in them and, crazy little gadgets and gears that you get to, put on. It really does give you this intense feel.